The Last of Us is a bad TV show, and I've never seen the second season. Yes, dear viewer, I am of the opinion that season 1 of this TV show is bad, which, judging by the near universal acclaim it has, means that this will probably be one of the more unpopular opinions I express on this channel, which honestly baffles me. Let me back up. I love The Last of Us video game. The only games that I've replayed more than The Last of Us are the Uncharted games. I have played this game on every difficulty, gotten every trophy except for the multiplayer-related ones, and have done the same for its Left Behind DLC. I love this game and the story it tells, and the relationship between Joel and Ellie unconditionally. All of that being said, I have never played The Last of Us Part 2 and never will. Why, you ask? Oh, no particular reason. I think that The Last of Us is a storytelling masterpiece, and so I was over the moon hyped for a television adaptation. And then Pedro Pascal was cast as Joel Miller. And then the show came out. Alright, let's get this out of the way immediately. The Last of Us is not a good adaptation of the game. The TV show makes surgical cuts and revisions to the game's plot, to its characters, to its character relationships, all of which serve to weaken and ultimately destroy the story that the video game was telling both thematically and narratively. The Last of Us is ultimately a story of a man learning to love again. Or rather, having love dragged out of his cold, blackened heart by a precocious child that he's been charged with protecting. Here's the bare-bones plot. In 2013, a fungal infection breaks out across the world which turns human beings into mindless, rampaging, cannibalistic monsters. Long story short, mushroom zombies. On the night of the outbreak, Joel Miller attempts to flee to safety with his brother Tommy and his young daughter Sarah, only for Sarah to be gunned down by a soldier who assumed she was already infected. Cut to 20 years later, and Joel has completely crashed out. Reasonably, having lost his daughter, he has regressed to an almost completely amoral state, caring about nothing save for surviving. It's revealed over the course of the game that Joel has at various points robbed, tortured, and murdered in order to survive. Not even in self-defense, either. Joel has preyed upon weaker survivors in order to save himself. He's spiraled so far that Tommy has essentially abandoned him because he couldn't stomach the things that Joel did in the name of survival, and the only acquaintances Joel has now are the people he runs jobs for, and a few select men and women who are willing to work with him. In the intervening years, large quarantine zones have been set up by the military where people can come live in something resembling community safe from the infected. The trade-off for this, though, is that martial law is always in effect and very few individual liberties are afforded to zone residents. Joel is hired by the Fireflies, a terrorist cell trying to oppose the borderline fascistic military bodies controlling the quarantine zones, to discreetly smuggle precious cargo across America to one of their headquarters. What is that cargo? A teenage girl named Ellie, who is immune to the fungus which turns humans into rage mushrooms. What follows is a story about a broken man unable and unwilling to open himself up emotionally and truly love, being forcefully pulled open and having his emotions resuscitated by Ellie as she gradually, over the course of the year they spend traveling together, wears down the walls he has built up and worms her way into his heart. By the time we get to the end of the game, Joel has completely flipped from his initial demeanor, seeing Ellie as a daughter and even reneging on his deal with the Fireflies after learning that they intend to dissect her to try to reverse engineer a cure from her. It's an incredibly emotional journey about a man learning to open himself up to love after experiencing one of the worst tragedies a man can experience, and, in a symbolic way, getting to make up for his failure to protect his biological daughter with his new surrogate daughter. And then on the flip side, you've got Ellie's journey, a naive child who has spent her entire life in quarantine zones, never having experienced the horrors of the outside world, and so lacking the cynical jadedness which has come to characterize all the adults around her. She's eager, she's excited, she's hopeful, but she is also, as I mentioned before, naive. She is inexperienced with what it takes to survive, and so is entirely unequipped for the journey she's about to go on with Joel. She's also entirely unequipped to deal with Joel. Not only is Joel probably the strongest male role model she's ever had in her life, having never met either of her parents, but he's also the most inhuman male role model she's ever had. Ellie's got a mouth on her, she's got ideas about the way things should be done, and Joel is not interested in any of it. At first. By the time Joel and Ellie get to the end of their journey, Ellie has also come to see Joel as a surrogate father. She's come to trust him implicitly, not only because Joel has proven himself to be a reliable and safe presence over and over again, but because he has also allowed himself to open up to her and love her. She was willing to trust him as her guardian when he was a standoffish, rude, bitter, violent, critical, impatient, temperamental stranger, and that trust has only grown as he has allowed himself to be morphed into the kind of man who deserves to be trusted. The evolution of these two characters is shown expertly throughout the game, both in cutscenes and in in-game dialogue, and their emotional journeys are two of the most compelling I've seen in the video game medium. The TV show tries to do this, but it doesn't try that hard. Part of the reason for this is because of the fact that, as I mentioned before, the show decided to cut and change events from the game. The video game takes roughly 14 hours to play through. Taking into account portions of the game where Ellie and Joel are separated, you've got about 9 to 10 hours of content of Joel and Ellie together, in cutscenes and in gameplay. That's 9 to 10 hours to depict these two developing their relationship over the course of a year. Every second of this time is utilized to characterize Joel and Ellie and depict their relationship and its development. I would go so far as to say that there is virtually nothing that can be cut from these portions without damaging the overall story for these characters. In contrast, The Last of Us TV show's first season is, taking each episode's runtime into account, roughly 9 hours in total, and that's including the episodes where Joel and Ellie are separated. If you calculate roughly based on how much Joel and Ellie interact, they barely interact in episode 1, so that's already about an hour gone. They are together for most of episode 2, they are both absent for most of episode 3, they get ample screen time to develop their relationship in episodes 4, 5, and some of 6, Joel is absent from episode 7, comatose for most of 8, and Ellie is absent from a large portion of 9. So out of 9 total episodes, we have 3 where Joel and Ellie are actually together, and then parts of 2 more where they're together. Let's be generous and count those last 2 as half an hour each. So that would mean in total, Joel and Ellie have about 4 hours of screen time together to build their relationship. So that's really bad. Roughly 10 hours for them in the game versus roughly 4 in the TV show. There are many ways you can try to explain this. A lot of that time in the game is padded out by gameplay, which can't be properly adapted into a TV show format, which is true, but that gameplay was still filled with dialogue between Joel and Ellie, which served to further their relationship. You can't adapt it one for one because TV shows are formatted differently from games, which have to create gameplay for players, but I would posit that it would be better if you used your big writer brain to find a way to keep those interactions and combat encounters, or at least some of the combat encounters, in the show rather than ditching them all together and losing the chance for more development. The other thing you might try to say about this is that 4 hours is more than enough. I mean, come on, movies are able to achieve all of this in 2 hours. Logan told essentially the exact same story in 2 hours, so surely 4 hours is plenty. Yes, 4 hours would be plenty if that was how you were writing your story from the beginning. If you went into The Last of Us knowing that you had 4 hours of runtime to establish your characters and show their arcs, then you could definitely write a story that fit within those constraints and worked. If, however, you wrote a story that played out over the course of 14 hours, structured the story and the character journeys to fit within that timeline of 14 hours, and then later decided arbitrarily to take a meat cleaver to the story and chop it up into smaller portions, then what you will end up doing is cutting away significant chunks of material which are integral to the story you were telling. Joel and Ellie's story was not designed to be told in 9 hours, it was designed to be told in 14. Their arcs and character moments were spaced out to fill that amount of time. When you start ripping out chunks of that story, you unwittingly take a baseball bat to the skull of the story we're trying to tell and leave it a deformed, bloody mess. Joel and Ellie's story is horribly underwritten in the TV show. You hardly get to see their relationship grow or evolve, and the only 2 episodes where you actually get the most content with them and the most development with them is a brief 2 to 3 days snapshot in their journey which played out over the course of a year. The show is relying on you to see the little nuggets of development it gives you and transpose those little nuggets onto the literal months that you don't see. Now, to be fair, the game did this too. You don't see every step of Joel and Ellie's journey, but you do see more, and the things you see are placed incredibly strategically. When traveling with Tess, you see Joel at his most standoffish to Ellie. He basically uses Tess as a shield to keep him apart from Ellie so he won't have to deal with her. When going on your adventure with Bill, you see Joel taking a more personal bodyguard role. Now that Tess has died, he feels a personal responsibility to finish the job for her, and so he's taking his role in Ellie's life much more seriously. But you can also see some cracks forming. You can see him coming to her defense more in conversations and allowing her to be vulnerable with him, even if he isn't willing to be vulnerable with her. When traveling with Henry and Sam, Ellie feels close enough to Joel to try to start breaking him out of his shell, reading jokes from a joke book she carries to him to try to get him to laugh, telling him about comic books she likes, things like that. Joel isn't especially talkative, but he's not trying to constantly shut her up like he was at the start of their journey either. When Joel reunites with Tommy, he confides in Tommy that he wants him to take Ellie off his hands because he doesn't trust himself to keep Ellie safe. He's not doing this because he's concerned about the success of his mission, but because he doesn't want a repeat of his failure with Sarah. Ellie refuses to be pawned off and insists on staying with him, which Joel ultimately reluctantly accepts. When they reach the university, Joel is willing to tell Ellie about what universities were, what kind of role they played in the civilized world, and even what some of his aspirations were when he was at her age, including, if you can believe it, that he wanted to be a musician of all things. You get the idea. You don't get to see every step of their journey together, but you get to see the most important steps. Now, I need to go over the numerous ways the TV show ruins this arc. First, as I mentioned before, the cut content. There are a myriad of little interactions which are shaved off of Joel and Ellie's story by the TV show, but the biggest cut is found in the aforementioned adventure with Bill. It's not there at all. In the video game, Joel and Ellie visit Bill, an acquaintance of Joel's, in order to get a vehicle from him which they can use to travel across the country. Bill takes them on a journey to find and restart the only operational truck in the area, and sees the two off. This is the most bare-bones summary of this section. It is this section where you start to see the hairline fractures in Joel's icy shell begin to form, which Ellie will continue wearing away at as the story progresses. It provides a lot of groundwork for the pair's story going forward, mostly due to the fact that it gives us the most content of Joel and Ellie together, while Joel is still unwilling to open up. This is Joel at the very forefront of his arc with Ellie, now that he no longer has Tess to act as a buffer between him and the little gremlin he's been stuck to care for. This is all skipped in the TV show, replaced with an hour-long flashback about Bill and his boyfriend Frank, which ends with Bill and Frank committing suicide together. Joel and Ellie arrive to find the pair's corpses. Joel finds a note Bill has left for him explaining why they killed themselves. Frank had cancer or something, I don't know. And take their truck to continue their journey. There are a lot of things to be said about why this was a bad change, one of the most interesting ones being that it actually ruins the point of Bill's inclusion in the game. In the game, Bill is a paranoid hermit, a stereotypical doomsday prepper who lives by himself and refuses to interact with anyone else unless absolutely necessary for his own survival, such as in the case of Joel, funnily enough. Frank is revealed to have been Bill's lover who, after eventually growing tired of Bill's ridiculous paranoia and refusal to go leave the confines of the little fort he built for himself, left Bill to try to escape using the very truck that Joel and Ellie are currently trying to get. Bill is portrayed as the eventual end result of the arc that Joel is currently on. He's a crazy, unwashed, paranoid schizo who has chased off the only meaningful relationship he actually had with his slavish devotion to doing nothing outside of what is absolutely necessary to survive. He had become so focused on merely surviving the apocalypse that he has neglected the more meaningful parts of life. Survival and nothing else at the cost of everything else had cost him, well, everything. And he's so far gone that he doesn't even realize or care about the extent of his loss. And this is the man that Joel is teetering on the edge of becoming if he continues living his philosophy of survive at all costs, screw everything else. Don't do it, Joel. Don't become the sweaty neckbeard. Go outside and touch grass. Please. But the more important issue is the damage it does to Joel and Ellie. If the video game laid out a sequence of events showing Joel's character journey in an A, B, C, and so on pattern, the TV show completely skipped B. So now we've got an alphabet without the letter B. Who do we think we are, Canada? God, I hope not. The Bill section is the most notorious example of this. There is, thankfully, no other example of sections in the game that were completely removed, but there are lots of examples of dialogue being removed. So much of the character moments and dialogue which make up Joel and Ellie's relationship are confined to gameplay sections of the game, sections which are trimmed or removed altogether. Essentially what we've got in this show are all the cutscenes from the game, plus the bare minimum amount of gameplay-related material to stitch set cutscenes together. But the problem with taking the bare minimum is that you make a bad TV show. Story moments which are designed to hit hard in the cutscenes, to build upon the groundwork laid during the gameplay sections, are once again left eviscerated by the removal of so much content. I don't care that Ellie is terrified by the idea of Joel pawning her off on his brother to finish the job. I don't even really think that she'd be that upset about it. They barely know each other. The most intimate interactions they've had with each other is Ellie reading jokes to Joel from her joke book, and Joel trying to console her after she was forced to shoot someone for the first time. More on that later. Joel telling Ellie that she's not his daughter doesn't hit with the emotional weight that it should, because we've really got no reason, if we're being honest, to think that either of them should have been thinking like that. They're not, and the show has not even come close to showing us reason to believe that they would. I would argue that this show relies almost entirely on the audience imprinting their own ideas about the story onto it in order to coast by. People who have played the games will remember the experience and imprint it onto their view of the show, and audience members who never played the games will recognize what the show is doing and imprint their own ideas subconsciously onto it, filling in the massive holes it leaves in its storytelling for them. It very much feels like the TV show is actively hoping you will imagine all of the extra scenes necessary to actually buy Joel and Ellie's relationship, because they've decided from the word go that they're not going to be showing it. Okay, now let's address the Pedro Pascal in the room. Pedro Pascal is not a good Joel, and we need to stop pretending that he is. There's a very fine line actors need to walk with characters like Joel. He's a hard man who has basically forcefully shut off all of his emotions in order to cope with the death of his daughter. The only things he allows himself to feel are rage and bitterness, and the only thing that keeps him from fully devolving into an animal is a small sliver of basic humanity which he still allows himself to feel. He's uncompromising, unemotional, about as close as you can get to being an unthinking, unfeeling, killing machine. This is part of what makes his relationship with Ellie so wonderful, the fact that an innocent child is able to draw out the humanity that this man tried to beat out of himself over the years of living through the apocalypse. By the time you get to the end of the game, this 50-year-old Terminator of a man has completely opened himself back up to loving the family in his life, especially Ellie, to the point that he would risk everything for her. To portray a character like Joel, you need the kind of man who can keep their guard up, keep themselves emotionally closed off, and yet still convey emotion. It's kind of paradoxical, but it's like I just said. You need someone who can show emotion while showing no emotion. Pedro is entirely incapable of portraying this, and as a result, his performance comes off as stilted at best. Wooden delivery, stiff and unnatural body posture and movements as he uses his prop gun. It just goes to show, to me, that Joel is a role completely incompatible with Pedro Pascal's sensibilities as an actor. His performance improves markedly in scenes where he needs to be emotional, to cry, to panic, but these aren't things that Joel does. He doesn't cry. He shoves it deep down and turns it into cancer like the rest of us. Just listen to the difference in line delivery between Pedro and Joel's original voice actor, Troy Baker.
You just come after her.
You just come after her.
One sounds like a ruthless man explaining why he's going to kill his victim. The other sounds like an actor trying to sound cold and ruthless as he practices his lines. Not to mention the fact that Pedro looks like he's never held a gun before in his life. There are lots of actors who are capable of playing characters like Joel. Clint Eastwood, Hugh Jackman, Rory McCann, Troy Baker, Christopher Judge, Josh Brolin. The list goes on, and Pedro is not on it. But it's okay, because we've got a solution to that. Do you remember how I mentioned a moment ago that Pedro's Joel cries and panics? A lot? Yeah, that's because that's a thing Joel does now. For some reason that boggles my mind, the creators of this show decided that it would be more interesting to replace the emotionless Terminator who learns to love again with an emotionally unstable man who's only ever barely keeping his emotions in check as he stumbles from one panic attack to another. Pedro is not capable of portraying Joel Miller as he is portrayed in the Last of Us video game, but he is occasionally able to portray Joel Miller as he is portrayed in the TV show. Aside from the fact that having Joel start out the story as a highly emotional man rather than an emotionally stunted one undercuts the character arc he is supposed to be going on, it just makes for a strange viewing experience. Sometimes he's a moody, standoffish wall who refuses to let anyone in. Sometimes he's a panicky mess who doesn't know what to do with himself. Sometimes he has PTSD attacks and flies off the handle when he sees guns pointed at people he cares about. You'd think that would happen a lot more than once if it was gonna happen at all. Sometimes he's a friendly, personable man who can remember how to smile, and sometimes he's a ruthless and unrepentant killer. The damage that this change in characterization causes for Joel's development with Ellie is really well exemplified by the first time Ellie uses a gun. In the game, when Ellie first shoots someone in order to save Joel, he immediately gets angry at her for using a gun after he told her not to. Ellie rightfully points out that he'd be dead if she hadn't used it, but Joel doesn't care. All he sees is a child with a gun, a liability that he doesn't want to have to account for. In the TV show, when Ellie uses a gun to save Joel for the first time, Joel soon afterwards comes to check on her to make sure she's okay, telling her that she shouldn't have to know what it's like to hurt or kill someone at her age. These are completely different characters, and it completely affects Joel's arc with Ellie. It is much less notable that the Joel of the TV show would eventually open up to Ellie. He's already kind of an open book as it is. He's really bad at being closed off. Video game Joel isn't even willing to acknowledge that she was a help to him. He's just upset that she didn't do what he said, because at this point in the story he still sees her more as a liability and cargo than as a human being, let alone a child. So we've got a Joel who's already more personable and approachable than his game counterpart, who's already more sympathetic to the girl he's transporting than his game counterpart, played by an actor who struggles to act like he could hurt a fly, much less be an authority figure to a rebellious young child. I honestly don't even think of the character in the TV series as Joel. They look nothing alike, they talk nothing alike, and they act nothing alike. So now that I've established all this, it's time to ask a question. How did this happen? Why is Joel so different from the video game? Why is so much time cut with Joel and Ellie and refocused around other characters? Well, I've got a theory. The Last of Us first 2 seasons were helmed by 2 men. Craig Mazin, known for his work on HBO's Chernobyl series, and Neil Druckmann, the creator and writer of The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2. After initially trying and failing to get the first game adapted into a film, Neil Druckmann approached Craig Mazin to help him adapt the game for television instead. Mazin was immediately enthralled by the game's story, so much so that he made some rather unfortunate comments about video games as a medium, which sparked a small backlash amongst gamers in general. The 2 men got a green light from HBO to make their series and set to work. Mazin has since made it clear that Neil Druckmann was from the beginning open and willing to make changes to the game's story, but only if the changes were better than the original material, a philosophy which led to the complete overhaul of Bill's story, a notable overhaul of Joel's character, and several notable changes to Ellie's character, among other things. I'm going to argue that Neil Druckmann had a very specific agenda when going about making changes to the story upon revisiting it. The Last of Us was released in 2013, and at the time of its release, one of the things that got it a lot of attention was Ellie's role in the game. Druckmann has talked at length about his intentions when writing The Last of Us, of creating a non-sexualized female lead for the game, something he felt was lacking in the video game medium. He also noted that becoming a father while making the game played a significant role in how he shaped Joel and Ellie's relationship, and that ultimately the game was about the kinds of heinous acts love can drive you to commit. After The Last of Us came out, Neil Druckmann's ideas began to further refine themselves, and this further refinement eventually resulted in The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us Part 2 received significant backlash upon its release, not only for killing off Joel in the first hour, but also for making significant changes to Joel's character in the few scenes that he does have. Joel is portrayed as much meeker in the second game compared to the first, unwilling to stand up for himself in arguments with Ellie, or even be firm with her or anyone else at all. He is also portrayed as much more naive and trusting than in the first game, willing to help strangers in need and follow them back to their hideout, a decision which directly leads to his death when said strangers promptly beat him to death, and willing to give out his name and identity freely when the first game not only showed him to be willing to abandon strangers to their deaths on the first night of the apocalypse, but paranoid about giving his name away to anyone unless absolutely necessary. His hardened edge has been completely lost between games, resulting in him looking like something of a pushover in the second game. And, oddly enough, this characterization of him in the second game is much closer to his portrayal in the TV show than in the first game. It seems to me that Neil Druckmann, in the years since the release of The Last of Us, has come to regret a lot of the decisions he made with that game. It comes off like he is actively trying to retcon and correct the record on the kind of man that Joel is. Joel, as he is in the first game, is a firm, uncompromising, strict authority figure for Ellie. He's arguably emotionally abusive to her at the beginning of the game due to his complete refusal to treat her as anything more than cargo. He's a flawed man, but as those flaws gradually get worn away over the course of the game, he doesn't become any less of an authority figure. He simply becomes a proper father to Ellie, someone who can direct her and be a positive, strong role model for her, while also being a safe source of protection for her. One of my favorite moments in the game comes very close to its end. Ellie and Joel become separated after Joel is rendered comatose following a severe abdomen wound. Ellie goes off on her own to try to find medicine to help Joel heal, and in the process is kidnapped by a group of cannibals who previously crossed paths with Joel and Ellie and want revenge. The cannibal leader, David, offers to spare Ellie if she takes them to Joel and agrees to become his concubine. Yeah, David's a bad dude. The less said about it, the better. Ellie escapes, but is tracked down by David and is forced to fight him off. David very nearly subdues her and takes advantage of her, but Ellie manages to kill him with his own machete, and then continues to mutilate his corpse. Not out of sadism, but out of animalistic fear. She's so terrified by what nearly happened to her that she just keeps hacking away, oblivious to the fact that he is actually dead already, and only stops when Joel, who's awakened from his coma and tracked her down, arrives and drags her away, hugging her and reassuring her that she's going to be okay. This is the first time Joel has been this outwardly caring to Ellie, and I love his line deliveries.
Oh, baby girl. It's okay.
He's initially shocked to see her in this state and tries to stop her, and when she starts yelling for him not to touch her, you can hear his voice change.
Stop! Stop!
Fucking touch me!
It's okay, it's me!
He realizes what has happened, or at least something close to what has happened, and immediately reassures her, letting her know that it's him who's holding her and not one of the cannibals. He wrestles the machete away from her, and she tries to tell him what David was going to do to her. You can hear the horror in his voice as he tries to reassure her more, and then they both leave together. Every detail about Joel here is important. The way that he balances firmness, making sure that Ellie calms down, with gentleness as he continually reassures her that she's safe, the quivering lip as he struggles to keep himself calm in the face of the trauma that this little girl has just endured. It's so clear that Joel has come to love this girl as his own daughter, and I don't think it's any coincidence that that love finally begins to show in the moment when he can tell that Ellie needs complete reassurance that she is in safe hands again. In the TV show, this scene is completely changed. Ellie hacks David to death, and then keeps going, and going, and going, and going. And at this point, if you're me, you're wondering, where's Joel? 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 Joel, where are you? What the fuck? Oh, there he is! Thank God the writers remembered him. From here, we get the scene of Joel calming Ellie down more or less as it appeared in the game. In the commentary for this episode, Neil Druckmann addressed the fact that the expectation for most audience members would be that this storyline would end with Joel showing up and saving Ellie from the cannibals, and that when writing the scene, even in the original game, he had had no intention of doing that. Which I applaud. I think it's a cool subversion of expectations to have Ellie be the one who saves herself in this situation. The story up to now has placed all the emphasis on Joel to save Ellie in every scenario, so it's a nice flip of the norms to have Ellie be the one who saves herself here. But Neil Druckmann, at the time of writing the original game, was also a new father, and he recognized something back then that he seems to have forgotten in the intervening decade. A father's role in a child's life is not only to protect, but to comfort, to be a place of safety and sanctuary when the world seems to be crashing down. Having Joel arrive at this moment, when Ellie is at her most panicked, literally going mad with fear, and talk her down off the ledge that she's on is an inspired choice. Not only does it highlight the important role that father figures have in the lives of the children, but it's such a perfectly raw way to drag Joel's fatherly nature back out of him kicking and screaming. He can't help but revert to dad mode when faced with this child who he's been bonding with for the better part of a year in a state of complete panic. It's the perfect turning point for Joel's character, and it's the perfect reminder that, even if Ellie is capable of saving herself from danger, she needs a father figure to help her stay grounded. She is, after all, still a child in a mad, mad world. Having Ellie calm herself down and begin leaving the town before Joel even catches up to her completely ruins this moment. First of all, what the hell were you thinking, Joel? Ellie's been kidnapped by cannibals, you have no idea what she's been through, and your first thought when you finally find her is to sneak up on her from behind and grab her? My dude, have you never heard of saying hello? You can't even make the argument that he was trying to be discreet because his actions cause her to start screaming in terror. Which of course it would. Ellie's been locked in a village with cannibals. It doesn't take a genius to realize that she's probably not going to be too keen on getting grabbed from behind. Man, I guess we can add being a brain-dead ham sandwich to the list of changes made to Joel for this series. You know why they wrote it like this. They knew they needed to adapt the scene from the game, but they changed things to have Ellie calm herself down, and so now they need a reason for her to start panicking again. So let's just have Joel tackle her for no reason. I am of the opinion that the writers didn't want to do this scene the way it happened in the game because they thought having Joel show up when he did takes away Ellie's agency. Having Joel be the one to talk her out of her panicked frenzy would imply that she needed him to help her calm down, which would imply that she's dependent on him, which goes against what Neil Druckmann wanted for this scene. Ellie needs to be portrayed as completely capable on her own, which includes a level of emotional control and maturity which would not at all be present for a child who just went through what she went through. This is what I mean when I say Neil Druckmann seems to want to fix his story. It comes off to me like he has in the intervening years come to feel like he placed too much emphasis on Joel as Ellie's guardian in the first game. Having Ellie be in any way dependent on Joel in the section of the story which is supposed to be about her surviving on her own would undercut what Neil Druckmann obviously feels is the most important aspect of said story, that she is strong and totally self-reliant. The father-daughter dynamic in the role that Joel fulfills in the story has been completely sidetracked so as to emphasize Ellie's autonomy. We can't portray Ellie as emotionally compromised and in need of a parental figure to act as a safe space for her. That would make her look weak. No, that would make her look like a child, which she is. It just speaks to a complete shift in writing philosophy for the TV show versus the video game. This story is no longer a story of a broken man finding new meaning in life and a new capacity to love, and a young girl finding a father figure she never knew she needed as she is thrust into the horrors of a harsh and cruel world. It's now the story of an action hero in the making and her aging bodyguard who come to see each other as something resembling a family. Also, before we entirely move on, I've got to ask, what is this noise he keeps making?
It's me.
The Last of Us TV show at its core feels like a story written by a man who is unsatisfied with, and even, in my opinion, embarrassed by the video game he wrote. He views the emphasis on Joel in Ellie's life as an authority figure and as a protector as a mistake, and would rather have a version of the story where he's just a loose father figure to her and nothing more. It's just so much less emotionally poignant than the game. Neil Druckmann is trying to fix problems that don't need fixing, because they're not problems. Joel's not a superhuman in the game, he's a man who's survived in a post-apocalyptic world for 20 years, who's also got dad strength. Don't threaten a man's children, he will tear your throat out to keep his family safe. And don't rewrite your story about a man and a young child becoming a found family to remove all the scenes of them becoming a found family. I feel like it should go without saying that this is incredibly counterproductive. So to summarize, The Last of Us is a bad show which actively tries to get as far away from the game's message and themes as possible while still keeping the basic plot the same. It is a poor at best adaptation of the game and would have been better served if there had been a rule on set that if anyone tries to make a change to the game's original story, they get thrown into a fire-breathing shark pit. And cast literally anyone else as Joel. Hell, I'd take Machete as Joel over Pedro. Thank you so much for watching this video, especially so if you stayed until the end. I hope you found it to be a favorable experience.
Telling you shit! That's alright. I believe him. No, wait! I ain't telling you shit.
It's okay.
No.
I believe him.
No.